here to discuss the story of Isaiah Thomas, not the Detroit Pistons Isaiah Thomas, IT, who played for the Boston Celtics, from Tacoma, Washington. Isaiah was Isaiah's probably what, 5'8.5" or 5'9" or so. Probably like 5'10" with his shoes on, but about 5'9" ish in that area. And man, Isaiah was he was a guy whose prime was cut short. If you remember when he was with Boston, he was really coming into his own. To take it back, he's from Tacoma, Washington, which is outside of a city outside of Seattle. If you're from the West Coast, if you know that area, he man, he was tough, man. He graduated high school '07, same time I did. So I remember him um probably from his freshman year in high school. He was just a little dude. He was probably like 5'7". Looked like a child. He had one of those baby faces, very very small in stature. I mean, he's about the same size as me. Uh Very small in stature, but young in facial look. And IT, man, he went to Curtis Senior High School. I remember their jerseys were like white and blue. So if anybody's from that area, you probably know. And he's from a lineage of great players. A lot of people don't know about all the great players that come out of Washington. Uh, you starting with Doug Christie. Doug Christie was a great player from the state of Washington, probably more from the Seattle area. Doug Christie, I believe, went to Pepperdine with, if you remember, Montel Jordan, the singer. He went to Pepperdine as well. Montel Jordan's a dude that's following Christ now, so shout out to Montel Jordan. Um, yeah, Doug Christie started off, built that pipeline, was a guy that went back to reach back to help a lot of these players. And that's how a lot of these guys make it. They either have like a parent or they have some type of like route to the NBA. So they're playing with NBA guys. They know NBA guys already. So it's not really any sort of reach when they're trying to get there. They know those guys already. And IT, he was tough at Curtis Senior. He averaged 32 a game his junior year. He was tough. Back by that time, he was already dunking. He was already above the rim, and he was small. He was above the rim. He was hitting contested threes. You can go watch that game online. He was They were playing against Peyton Siva. They were playing against Franklin High School. Um, Peyton Siva. Peyton Siva was really good. Peyton Siva and Benoit Overton. Benoit Overton went to UW. He might have played with Isaiah. Another I remember that era. Benoit, probably the same graduating class as Isaiah. Probably went there a little bit earlier, but he went to University of Washington, UW. Else went to UW. Holiday, Justin Holiday, Drew Holiday's older brother. His game was a little bit different probably back then, but he went to UW as well. Abdul Gaddy, if anybody's from that area too, they'll remember Abdul Gaddy. Man, but he was going off against Franklin. Isaiah went crazy, had a great game. If you're in here, let me know where you're from. Thanks for joining in. Isaiah, he went off in that game, so you could check that game out. Also, he didn't really have the grades, and if you're in this time, like before, like the 2010s, like that 2005 to probably like 2009 ish, that era, it was super popular for guys to go to prep school. Like it was a super popular thing to go to prep and have that extra year of eligibility in college. But I don't know if that became like the best thing because so a lot of prep schools were popping up. You know what I mean? There was a lot of schools. I remember at that time, some of them were even closing down shortly after. And I think one of the things that killed a lot of these prep schools is kids were going there to get an extra year of eligibility, and they would go to get eligibility, and they weren't even eligible. They were like, because a lot of these classes, I guess they were taking classes that weren't really legitimate. I mean, it could help with you studying for SATs, but if you're taking classes that are not really legitimate, then those classes won't really transfer to school. They won't transfer to college level. But if anybody knows a little bit more about that, I'd be interested to hear. But there's a lot of good ones. Um, there's some good ones. Virginia, Hargrave Academy in Virginia. Oak Hill is not a prep school, but it's a good boarding school. Um, uh, North Mount Herman was is one of those schools where a lot of like academics, you see a lot of those guys at Mount Herman. They end up going to like Ivy League schools and things like that. Um, yeah, a lot of good prep schools, but he ended up going to South Kent, and he went to South Kent with a dude named Matthew Bryan Manning, I believe his name was. And I believe Matthew, he was either from Canada or he was from England. Matthew was about like 6'7". You know what I mean? He was like a 3-4 man, good athlete off of 1 foot, you know, good player. I wonder what he's up to right now. If anybody knows, throw it in the chat. But he was a good player. They played together, I believe, at South Kent. South Kent was good. South Kent was good, and he just needed it to get eligible. And the thing though about it was, I remember, years later, they were talking about how he would go stay with Jamal Crawford. Speaking on that pipeline, I'll get into the pipeline a little bit after this. But he would stay with Jamal Crawford, who was playing on the Knicks at the time. So the New York is only a couple hours away. So he'd go up to New York and hang with Jamal Crawford to feel closer to home. He's a West Coast kid. He's from Washington. He's from Tacoma, right? So he feels uncomfortable being on the East Coast. He doesn't have family. He's 18 years old. He wants to feel comfortable. So he's hanging with Jamal Crawford, and Jamal Crawford is giving him that sense of home. You know what I mean? So Jamal Crawford is bringing him over to his house, and it's a way for him to just, away from basketball, to feel at home, to feel comfortable, to feel like almost in a way, maybe like himself. You know what I mean? At that age, you need family, you need loved ones, you need friends, you need a certain community to be able to really thrive in certain ways off the court, because there's more to life than basketball. I mean, if you even look at Isaiah's social media, he says that if I was only known as a basketball player or a great basketball player, I failed in life. I failed as a man. You know what I mean? So there's a lot more to life than basketball. But yeah. So Jamal Crawford, I mean, he's a guy. He got the J Crossover League out in Washington, where a lot of people play at, and he's been a inspiration. He's been a guy who's helped a lot of those guys. Nate Robinson. Nate Robinson was in the league a little bit before Isaiah, so he kind of showed Isaiah the ropes in many ways, because they're similar sized guys. Isaiah maybe slightly taller. I believe Nate was 5'7" and 3/4" with no shoes, so 5'9" with shoes. When he was measured back then, and I remember watching Nate for the first time. He went to UW. He originally was a UW. And when I say UW, I mean the University of Washington. He was originally recruited to the University of Washington to play football. So he was like a D back, I believe, a defensive back. He was probably a corner. Good athlete, obviously, fast, jumps high. And the first game I seen Nate Robinson play, man, this was probably maybe 2007, 2008 or so. This is back when University of Washington had Will Conroy. They had Brandon Roy. If anybody remembers Brandon Roy, Brandon Roy was cold as ice, man. He played for Portland Trailblazers in the early 2000s. Any of you young kids that don't like, solid human being and a dope basketball player. I think he's a high school coach now, but they played together at UW, and man, Nate just went off. Like, they were playing against North Carolina State, and a ball comes off the rim, and Nate just he just slams it back. I'm like, who's this dude? You know what I'm saying? I'm like, yo, this dude is crazy in a good way, man. This man is hooping, bro. I'm like, yo, who is this cat, bro? And ever since then, I would always follow him. I would always follow him, and Nate ended up being a first round pick for the Knicks back when Isaiah Thomas was there. The other Isaiah Thomas from Detroit was the GM of the Knicks at the time. So he drafted him first round. And a lot of people may have been like, I don't know about that pick, but Nate Robinson, they were different. They were different kind of players. One of my boys, I'll shout him out on here, a guy named Rasheed Wortham. Dope dude. Dope dude. He back in the days I used to help kids get into college for basketball. So he was a dude who really stood out in my mind. Like he used to help my buddy um when I went to WVU. I went to West Virginia University. So one of my buddies, he went to a school that I kind of went to. I went to the community college that was connected to a D2 school called Fairmont State in West Virginia. And then I transferred to West Virginia University. When I transferred, my buddy Rashid, he was the coach at Eastern Washington at the time, he he got my buddy tickets to the WVU game because he was friends with one of the coaches at WVU at West Virginia University. So just in case you know that the acronyms, WVU was West Virginia University. And shout out to Blessing Ejiofo on the Nigerian women's basketball team. She's a West Virginia alum. Um, yeah, yeah. Rashid, man, we always used to talk about this. Was back in the days before Isaiah got to the league, because Isaiah is from Tacoma, like Coach Rashid. So Joshua Smith, who's also from that area, he was a big time high school recruit. If anybody remembers him, not Josh Smith that played at Oak Hill and played for Atlanta Hawks, a different Joshua Smith. I believe Joshua Smith played at Georgetown, coming out of high school. And we used to talk about all these guys, Coach Rashid and me. Another guy from Tacoma. We'll probably just get into a lot of these Washington State players, the state of Washington. So another guy from Tacoma was Avery Bradley. We used to talk about Avery Bradley. Avery Bradley was a big high school recruit, and he was telling me that this is game right here. This is game right here. This is not like you won't hear this anywhere else. Coach Rashid, like he was tapped in, like he was clued in, like he was boys with these dudes. You know what I mean? Like these dudes are NBA dudes, but these were his guys. You know what I'm saying? Maybe we should get Coach Rashid and we do an interview with Coach Rashid. But he's the coach at Tacoma Community College. Just in case if anybody wants to look him up, great dude. And we would talk about Avery Bradley, and he was telling Avery, like, and this was back when Avery was trying to choose between the University of Texas and UCLA, right? He ended up going to the University of Texas, by the way. But McDonald's All-American, one of the best players in high school basketball in America at the time. And funny enough, him and Isaiah ended up playing together in Boston, two Tacoma boys that made it. You know what I mean? And Avery Bradley was a heck of a defender, great defender in the NBA. And Coach Rashid, we would talk about all these guys, and he would tell me like Nate, and this was when Nate Robinson was killing in the NBA. He was averaging like 18 points a game for the Knicks. And he's like, listen, Nate Robinson's a defender, and Isaiah's a scorer. Isaiah is a he's a scorer. I was like, all right, yeah. You know what I mean? But this was back when Isaiah was in college. And he's just like, yo, man, this dude could score the ball. So after South Kent, Isaiah goes to the University of Washington, UW. Freshman year, I think he averaged like 15 a game freshman year. I think he averaged like 15 a game freshman year. I could be wrong. But I think he was Pac-10 freshman of the year, his first year in college, and he just went to work. You know what I mean? And he always had that confidence. He always knew he could do it. Um, Sophomore year, he had a good sophomore year. And then his junior year, he decided to leave and declare for the NBA draft. So you got to think he's playing against NBA dudes all the time. So he knew that there probably wasn't much that he could do to raise his stock, right? He ended up being the last pick of the draft, I believe, number 60, right? But he's playing against, like, think about all the guys that come from Washington. Like some of them, he's played later, but Mike James, I believe he played college at Lamar. He played at Lamar University. One of my buddies that I used to help with his recruitment played at Lamar too. He played under Bobby Knight's son when he was the coach at Lamar in Texas. Yeah, man, I'm a basketball guy, man. I go way back with this stuff. Um, and the thing about it was, he's playing against all these dudes, right? He's playing against Mike James, like I said. He's playing against Jamal Crawford, who's in the NBA. He's playing against who else? Nate Robinson, who's in the NBA. Some other guys who ended up making it as well. Spencer Hawes, big man from the state of Washington. I don't know if any of y'all remember Spencer Hawes. Um, Obviously, Brandon Roy's from the state of Washington. DeJounte Murray, who's been an all-star in the NBA. He just got traded to I forgot where DeJounte Murray just got traded to. Started with the Spurs, was on Atlanta for the last 2 years. I think he's on New Orleans. I think he's playing in New Orleans now. DeJounte Murray, another guy from the state of Washington. Paolo Banchero is another guy from the state of Washington. I believe Jalen Green is from the state of Washington as well. Who else are really good players from the state of Washington? Doug Christie, who was mentioned in the beginning. Zach Levine. Zach Levine's another one of the young boys that they helped bring up in the game. I remember Zach Levine too when he was coming up. I was like, this kid's different. This kid's special, man. He wasn't a McDonald's All-American or anything, but you could just tell he was just oozing with potential. He just he was just so athletic. Everything, he just had everything. He still has it. You know what I mean? Zach Levine is gifted. He's one of those dudes. If he never made the NBA, they be talking about how he was one of the coldest players that ever lived. Like he just the ability is just out of this world. I mean, even DeMar DeRozan was raving about him. He's like, man, the way Zach makes everything look so easy, man. He makes everything look easy. Zach Levine is a cold dude, man. Another Washington dude, another Washington State dude. Trying to think of more of those guys from that. Tony Roten. Tony Roten played at the University of Washington as well. He's cousins with Nate Robinson. He was about 6'4". He was bigger than Nate, but yeah, man, he played for the Sixers. He had 1 year he was averaging about 16 a night, 16, 5 and 5 probably. Somewhere in that range. You know what I mean? Yeah, man, just to give you a little bit of the flavor of all those guys from Washington State that was going against Isaiah, man. So he knew he could play in the NBA. You know what I mean? He knew he could play in the NBA. Isaiah goes last pick in the draft, and this was the year where Jimmer Fredette is their first round pick. And shout out to Jimmer Fredette, man. He got hurt in the 3-on-3 in the Olympics, so he wasn't really able to play to the level that he wanted to play. He missed like the last 5 games of 3x3. He didn't really have his opportunity, but he still brought them to the one of the key reasons why they went to the Olympics. They did not make the Olympics in the last time in 3x3. So shout out to Jimmer Fredette. But Jimmer Fredette was the starting point guard. It was the high draft back. He was a first round pick. But the thing was, I remember that year, Isaiah was just so consistent, game after game after game after game after game after game. You know what I mean? Like Isaiah was just like he just going off. I think he averaged double figures, probably about 11. 11 and a half, 11.5 points per game his rookie year in the league. Man, and then the next year he was at like 13. And by the end of his run with Sacramento, he was averaging 20 a night. You know what I mean? He was just so consistent, you couldn't deny him. And I remember having him on fantasy at that time. The dude was just so consistent game after game after game. It was just like, man, you can't deny what this guy's putting up. So he gets himself a big contract. He gets his big contract with Phoenix, and he's playing with Phoenix for a little bit. And this was around the time where Phoenix had uh, um, my man from Slovenia. He played what's his name? Dragic. Goran Dragic. Dragic, who played with Luca, right? And that's how I knew Luca was gonna be a problem, because Goran, like Luca's playing in FIBA, and maybe Luca's another episode, but Luca was playing in FIBA with Goran and his brother Zoran. Zoran, who played for Slovenia, and Luca's father also played for the Slovenia team. So when Dragic was saying that Luca was the real deal, then you know it's true. You know what I mean? Dragic was an all-star, and that year where he played with Isaiah, he was third team All NBA. I believe that was the same year. So they went all in on Dragic for a little bit, and then Isaiah gets traded to Boston. And this is where it kind of gets interesting, because a lot of the things about the NBA, if you ask a lot of NBA guys, they'll tell you like a lot of guys could play bigger parts, but everybody has a role, you know what I mean? Like everybody's role isn't to take 20 shots a night. It just isn't your role. But you have to be the best you can be in your role. And Isaiah was put in a position where he was the focal point of the offense. He was the number one option. And part of the reason why I believe he was able to get into that position was, I believe Danny Ainge wasn't necessarily worried about winning at that time, right? Because I believe they had the draft picks, and those draft picks probably were the ones that turned into Jason Tatum, that turned into Jaylen Brown, guys like that, right? So he was stacking up draft picks, so he didn't care about losing. He already had those. He didn't. This is my opinion. You know what I mean? I would like to hear, like, if anybody knows a little bit more about the situation, I would like to hear your opinion. But I believe he wasn't worried about it, right? A lot of the times in professional sports, if the GM gives you the green light, then that's why teams win. And if the GM doesn't give you the green light, that's why they lose. It's not as much as like, this team is not good, this team is trash. Like GM's ownership, they call the shots. And it's generally better that one or the other is really the one making the moves, because a lot of times when there's two chefs in the kitchen, it doesn't really work. So either the owner really knows basketball, like Dr. Buss, or like Steinbrenner with the Yankees, you know what I mean? Like the owner really knows like the sport in particular. The owner knows the sport, or the GM is able to really do what they got to do, and they're giving the player the green light to win. And thing with Isaiah, they were playing with house money. So Isaiah comes in and he's gunning. Like he's able to, you know what I mean, really do his thing. He makes the all-star team. Isaiah is on a team where he's the focal point of the offense. He's scoring, he's going off. You know what I mean? And they're making the playoffs. And if you think about it, the year after, the next year, he's getting like 29 a night. You know what I mean? He's second team All NBA. And Boston, I believe, was leading. And somebody else, if you're in the chat, let me know if this is correct. I believe Boston was the first team in the East at that time. So it was a whole bunch of like they were all playing D. Like they were D'ing up, they were locking up, and Isaiah was scoring. So that was kind of like the form. It was almost like Allen Iverson 2.0. It was basically like the Allen Iverson formula when he was in the early 90s with early 2000s with Philadelphia, right? It was Aaron McKee, it was Eric Snow, it was uh Dikembe Mutombo. If anybody remembers Allen Iverson, that era, it was a lot of Allen Iverson scoring. Mutombo was a great defender, and that was kind of like the formula that they used. And they used Eric Snow as the bigger point guard, so Allen Iverson as the smaller guard could play the two guard. So Isaiah was just a smaller guard, and he was going off. And then he had Avery Bradley, who was bigger. He was about 6'3" or so, and he was 6'2", but he was able to defend. So Isaiah would just go off, and people would they knew he was going to his left hand, but there's nothing you could do. That man was just he was just unstoppable going to his left, and unfortunately, certain things within his life, family wise, I don't really want to get into his family, but as far as on the court, he had that hip injury, and that hip injury, it stole a lot of his explosiveness, and he's a smaller guard. So when you're a smaller guard, thing affects any little thing affects your ability to play at a high level, and the NBA is not really forgiving to smaller guards. So anything goes wrong, you know what I mean? I mean, it's a testament to how great he is, the fact that he's still getting contracts year after year. And I think another reason why is because he's a solid teammate. If you listen to his interviews, you listen to the things that he says, that man, he speaks highly of organizations, he speaks highly of his teammates. He's a person who is a quality person and a quality teammate. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, he was traded away. He ended up going to Cleveland, played with LeBron, and he bounced around a little bit. But this is a testament to all you guards who are a little bit smaller. And even if you don't play basketball, doesn't matter what you do. If you're underestimated, putting in the work, paying attention to the details, learning your craft, spending that time honing your skills, staying prayed up, all those things could allow you to be in positions that people didn't think you would be in, right? Isaiah is a 5'9" guard or so, and look what he did. Like, not too many dudes at 5'9" could average 29 points a game in the NBA, right? So just remember, when people tell you you can't do something, stay encouraged. And I'll end it here. God bless. In Jesus' name, amen. Story of Isaiah Thomas, heart over height.